What's good, y'all? It is Tuesday, January 6th. My name is Patrick, and you are listening to The Morning Show. When I was prepping for this episode, I kind of forgot that it was coming out on January 6th, which, for folks who may not know, is the anniversary. Well, today is the 5th anniversary of the violent insurrection that occurred at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. It happened because a bunch of Trump supporters were bought into a bunch of Trump lies about the 2020 election and decided that after being prompted to attend a rally in D.C., had the flames of violent insurrection on the mind fanned by a speech from Donald Trump immediately preceding the march on the Capitol. I remember I was, so at this time, 2021, I was working at a call center for a vet's office here in Indianapolis. And there were probably, I think there were 4 more people on my team at that time. And we worked in we had like a back room kind of to ourselves to work at, and we all had our own little like cubicle thing. And I just remember we all had some second screen up, another tab of what was happening in DC. And I just remember it being like really, really scary. Like people were scared. I was scared because I think I mean, this is very naive of me and very first world privilege of me, but I don't know that I'd ever really thought about what it would be like to witness an attempted overthrow of the U.S. government. And truly, that's what it was. And it was violent because, like, people literally died. I mean, it was violent before that, before any deaths. But I think Ashley Babbitt is her name. That was the person who, one of the Trump supporters who got shot and killed. I believe at least 2 police officers died because of injuries that they suffered during the insurrection. And so, and I mean, like, it was wild to see videos after the fact of Congress members, like, literally running for their lives, particularly Republican Congress people. Like, there's a video of Josh Hawley, like, literally running away. And it was, like, it's just like, there are people fearing for their lives who have been perpetuating the lies that led to this thing to happen in the first place. And so to see that, to see the rhetoric juxtaposed with the running away, I've always thought was very interesting. And unfortunately indicative of the people who end up in positions to represent us, not just at a state level, but at the national level. And yeah. So one of the things I remember thinking very explicitly, though, was that I genuinely thought that there is no possible way that things could get worse than this. There's no possible way that we could find ourselves, in my lifetime at least, in a situation where it feels like what you might read in a history or textbook is what's currently happening. And again, very first world, very naive, very privileged take and perspective for me to have. But one I had nonetheless. Which brings us to today in Venezuela. All right, so I mentioned it on Friday, I believe, of last week. If you are a morning show listener, fact check me. in the comments in the chat. But last week, the U.S. significantly escalated their standoff, I guess, with Venezuela and Maduro, the president of Venezuela, the dictator, I guess I should say, of Venezuela. And they put troops on the ground in Venezuela. According to them, shut all the lights off across the city that they were invading, and went and detained, captured, and extradited both the dictator Maduro and his wife back to the U.S. This comes on the heels of a lot of things. So earlier at the beginning of 2025, there was a high increase in the rhetoric around immigration and illegal immigration and gangs bringing drugs into the U.S. and billions of people dying every day, according to Donald Trump and the people who support him. And one of the countries, the main country, who became the scapegoat for this drug infestation was Venezuela. That rhetoric started to ramp up, and over time you saw the U.S. start to videos coming out, declassified videos coming out of the U.S. firing upon and killing allegedly Tren de Agua gang members who were shipping or who were trafficking drugs from Venezuela to the U.S. allegedly. And I feel like a number of at least 5 that I can remember reading about or seeing. Maybe not that many. Maybe it was only 3. But at least in one hand, you could hold the amount of times that we attacked a boat that allegedly had drugs on it. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe that one of the boats was a fishing boat. Never verified that any of the folks on these boats were part of that gang. Never verified that there were actually any drugs on the boats that were bombing in the first place. Almost, based on what I read, almost assuredly that boat not even heading to the U.S. At least one of the boats. So, I mean, take with that what you will. I'm going to throw a bunch of links in the show notes so you can start to do that research for yourself if you're interested. But yeah, so since the start of 2025, like, this has been escalating in this direction. And I think in November, we started to seize oil tankers coming out of Venezuela, shipping oil to, I believe they have oil going all over the place, but specifically Russia and China, if I got my notes correct here. So that has all led to what happened last week and the capture and extradition of Maduro. And I think there are a lot of interesting things here that I want to touch on. The first one is that I just want to out the gate say that I know that Maduro was a terrible, terrible person. Like, blue check mark certified, horrible person. Up there with potential, or maybe not the same as the Netanyahus of the world, but definitely in that camp of like, I'll kill whoever gets in my way. All I care about is profit. All I care about is power. I don't really care about the people. And so we've seen one of the discourses that has come out of this has been people in Venezuela or Venezuelans asking for people to let them lead in whatever this public reaction is to Maduro's ousting because they hate him. And so they feel like they're cheering and celebrating because it's a win for them, because it is. Like, they've been suffering under his boot for however long, and he came to power by taking it away. And like, people have been yearning for freedom. However, I don't know that freedom will come with U.S. intervention. Historically, I would say that it has not. historians and people who have done a lot more scholarship and work on this than I have also said that. Mainly that both of those things can be true, and that it is really just as scary to think about what the U.S. might try to do in place of Maduro. So one of the videos that has gone out, or actually, it's all over the place because it's like press conference. Essentially, Trump has said that we're going to stay in Venezuela and run it until we see fit. And because he has said this multiple times, and because a lot of his lackeys like Rubio and Hegseth don't really seem to know exactly what our role, the U.S.'s role is now in the maintenance of Venezuela, him going into these press conferences really gave the game away, because he can't not tell us why it is he's doing what he's doing, because he wants the credit. He wants the credit for having done this. So, like I said at the top, the talking point for the past year, for a long time, has been drugs. That is the reason that we are taking military action. The drugs kill 100 trillion people a year, a day, every single moment of your life. Everyone is dying from drugs that are coming from Venezuela or other countries, wherever the scapegoat might be, whoever the scapegoat might be at a certain point in time. The drugs has been the cover. The reality in this particular case is oil. So you might remember that I mentioned that we had seized some oil tankers over this conflict. And the oil tank seizures, I think, perked up some ears, but I think people who are, again, historians, scholars, like, kind of already knew where this was going in the first place, because Venezuela is oil rich. I think I read they have like one of the largest untapped reserves left in the world. And if you have listened to any of these press conferences that Trump has done, he has talked about almost exclusively the oil. He has talked about how the oil he has talked about how the oil belonged to the U.S. a long time ago, which at a certain point we did have private corporations that were stationed in Venezuela and were pumping out oil and selling it at a profit to themselves and to the detriment of the Venezuelan people. And then I think in 1975, when Hugo Chavez took power, he nationalized the oil reserves, bought out the private oil companies, and essentially told them to leave. Now, the nationalization of the oil did not necessarily mean better for the people of Venezuela. And I think that is evidenced by the fact that one of the talking points that I keep hearing over and over again is that Maduro has not done enough to produce enough oil to send to other people, and then to be sold. And so, like, that's their plan, is to invite in a bunch of oil magnates and tycoons to strip the country dry of all of its resource, and then at a certain point leave. And I think that's one of the things we got to keep talking about. We got to keep talking about the oil. So, and this might have been a clickbait headline, but I can't find it. I will try and find it and link in the show notes. But before I sat down to record this, I saw on a website something about how Congressperson says gas prices will be the lowest they'll ever be or the lowest they've been in 20 years in 2026. And I thought that was just really interesting timing in conjunction with what we're doing in Venezuela. Because the reason we can make lower gas prices is that we have now accessed larger amounts of oil that we can manufacture and produce and ship, which will help to drive the cost down for a time. It'll be great if we have low gas prices in 2026, but we don't know what that means in the long run. So that is like, in a nutshell, that's kind of like my understanding of what is going on here. I think there are a lot of strings that tie together and touch a lot of different dots on a map that up close doesn't always seem to show what's going on. But when we take a step back, when we look at the bigger picture, we can start to see what actually is happening and how that's going to directly impact us. I talked about the oil. I talked about the affordability of gas. Like, it'll be great to see lower prices at the pump, and at what cost? We need to stay informed. We need to stay engaged. We need to know like why these things are happening. So that's what I hope to do, and hopefully next week we'll see what's going on. All right, before I wrap it up here on this fine Tuesday, I want to talk about the 2026 legislative session here at the Indiana Statehouse that has got back underway, because technically it started in December because the Republicans in Indiana's legislature thought that they'd be able to ram through gerrymandered maps, but we showed them that that's not what we do. Anyways, that decision has led to a kind of truncated legislative session that should have started now, but is now already a month gone. So there's less time to get your bills through committee and onto the floor to be debated and potentially passed into law. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that you see headlines on and coming up, and it's all important, I think. I'm still doing my research, but there are 3 things that I just wanted to highlight very quickly, because I'm going to be talking about these things through the rest of this week. So for this particular legislative session, for the next few days or few months, the 3 things that I'm keeping an eye on very closely are public education, because we've already been talking about it, particularly with the Indianapolis Local Education Alliance's recommendations heading towards the Statehouse for this particular thing. Like, that's something I got a very close eye on, because that's going to affect a lot of things moving forward in our education space here in Indianapolis and Indiana. The second thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on is affordability. What bills, what legislative measures, what policies are coming up across the table in committee that are going to address affordability. One of the things that I see coming up a lot, and one of the things that I personally am feeling, is childcare. So I think I'm going to be having some conversations about that specifically, but I'm interested to see how House and Senate GOP members approach affordability in Indiana specifically. I think from a federal perspective, like, I'm not surprised that they said one thing and did another, but I'd be interested to see how the Indiana GOP tackles affordability here in 2026, especially after what happened with redistricting. And then the last one is utilities and data centers. So right before I started to record, I saw a thread from super awesome person and citizen journalist Wildstyle Pichelle about the Martindale Brightwood data center that is trying to be built. It is proposed, so I should say the proposed Martindale Brightwood data center. So earlier, at least in the last couple years, Martin University, which is getting ready to shut down, Indiana's only HBCU, historically black college university, sold property to a developer who is working on this proposed data center. Now that Martin is closing, he has reported that the property that the university sits on is about to be sold. And the buyer is currently unknown. I'm feeling really stuffed up right now, so I apologize if it sounds like I'm stuffed up. But I'm going to keep an eye on that, because we've already seen a lot of community members turn up and turn out at town halls, at public forums, and also in the streets, like in Martindale Brightwood, where these data centers are trying to get pushed through. And one of the things that those data centers are going to affect a lot are the cost of our utilities. I just watched a really informative video from Hank Green about water usage in data centers. And the big takeaway that I had is that data centers, unlike uh, like water treatment facilities and stuff, who have dedicated pipes and lines that run to and fro and collect and dump from usually rivers, lakes, and oceans. These data centers tap into municipal water supplies. And so they're pulling water away from the people who live in the cities and towns and areas that these data centers are going up. Instead of creating a dedicated system, because these data centers need a ton of water to keep their units cool and constantly cooled, that requires a ton of water. And here's the thing: the water that is being pulled, the water that is used to cool, just needs to be cold. It doesn't need to be a specific kind of water. It doesn't need to be our drinking water, and yet that is the plan. So, data centers and utilities, something I'm very interested in keeping an eye on as we move forward here in 2026. And like I said, we are in a shorter legislative cycle at the moment because of the failed redistricting attempt in December, which kickstarted the 2026 session. So, less time for stuff to happen, which means things are going to be happening very fast. And so, we have to stay on it. We have to stay paying attention, and we have to stay engaged and connected as much as we can, whatever your capacity allows, and hopefully a little bit past it, because these are important things that are happening, and we need to know so we can fight back and resist. Shout out to everybody who tuned into yesterday's episode. I think it was one of my best podcast episodes, especially as a solo. Talking about a lot of things, particularly the 3 things I'm prioritizing here in 2026. I appreciate you all who are continuing to show up for the morning show. It means a lot. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. Just staying tapped in, just staying engaged, and just being able to share not only my perspective, but just literal facts about what's happening. The 3 things I'm prioritizing this year are letting things go, being accountable, and asking for help. So just want to keep reiterating those for myself and for y'all if you're interested. And last but not least, I'm going to have a really incredible conversation, particularly for adoptees, coming out next Monday. So episode 11, if you're an adoptee or interested in the adoptee perspective, that's going to be the one for you. So until that Monday, my name is Patrick Armstrong, and this has been The Morning Show. Till tomorrow.